All right, this is gonna be an expensive video. Today we're gonna go over the Superdually, the costs, how to keep in budget if you have a budget in mind, or keep it cheap, and basically buy something parted out and get with the parts you need and then have no cost to yourself whatsoever or very little cost. All right, let me go over here and get this from what I told my wife this truck cost to build versus what it actually cost right here. All right, so we have the truck body, which consisted of all the blue body parts minus the front end because we sold that and bought this one. The original 89 truck frame, the transmission it came with, which was a TH350, the drive shaft, the running gear, all that sort of stuff. What we did is we had a 350 out of the Blazer that we hooked all up together and got it running at first, just to make sure we liked driving the truck as what we wanted before we dropped all this money on the rest of the build. So we paid $3,500 for it, just to kind of give you the color code. Red's gonna be what we spent, green's gonna be we sold something, got money back, and black's gonna be the total. So truck body, frame, and transmission was $3,500. All right, once we got the build done, I sold the frame for $1,500. So we pretty much almost cut the cost of that stuff in half. Transmission, I sold it for $350. So the grand total for all the sheet metal, the cab, the back, all full of interior, keep in mind, cost $1,650. So going into it, obviously you want to have a good body to start with. Problem is, if you go buy just a cab, the chances of you finding a title to go with it are slim to none. Then it gets all complicated when you go to down to your local DMV government, because they make it complicated anyways. So I got one that had a frame and everything. It was two-wheel drive, which was fine because we were going on the Super Duty frame from the start anyways. So we got all that, we sold it, unloaded it off for $1,650. All right, so after we figured out what we were doing with the body, and we knew we were getting the frame, which we'll cover in a second, we had to do the motor. I really wanted a Duramax and was thinking about putting it on a Duramax frame, but all the decent Duramaxes are overpriced, and every kid has got in the thing and put some max tune on it and melted stuff in it and still thinks it's worth $30,000 for a truck with 300,000 miles on it. So we went with a 12 valve Cummins. It took forever to find one because people also think those things are made of gold too. Little friendly buyer's tip, if you're looking for one, look for RVs. They typically have the motor. People have not souped them up and boosted them to all get out, and they typically have low miles. This thing had 69,000 miles on it in an RV, and it had a P-pump on it. If you found a P-pump truck, they were gonna want probably $5,000 or $6,000 for the whole thing, or for just the motor, and it's gonna have a ton of miles on it and probably have blow-by. All right, so I got that, and the guy was selling a whole RV. I thought we would just buy the RV and drive it home, make a cool video out of it, but the airbags were shot in it, so we couldn't do that. Luckily for us, the guy owned a tow truck company, so he made me a deal. If I paid him his full asking price, which was $3,000, he would have his guys at his shop pull the motor for me, and I got to keep the Allison transmission, and he would throw the RV away for $3 grand. That's a steal considering how low the miles were, and I knew I could flip that transmission and get a little bit of money out of it. So if you look right over here, sold the AT 545 Allison, which is like a 4-speed that they put in buses and stuff like that. Some of them reverse because they're rear engine, like this one was in a rear engine RV. Sold that for $300, and then it had an air compressor on it for the air brakes and the air lines and all that sort of stuff. Looking back, I kind of wish I'd have kept it because it'd been perfect to put the air tank I want to put on here later, but we're just going to go with a VIA air kit. Sold that for $150. So the whole motor ended up costing me $27.50. All right, so think about it. We got a 69,000 mile 12 valve with a P-pump, no blow-by in it, totally fine, been in an RV, so it's been all pretty much highway miles, not dragging skid steers and dump trailers that are 3 times what they're supposed to weigh. So we did that. Next, transmission. All right, we didn't want to go with the automatic Dodge transmission because everybody knows what's wrong with the automatic Dodge transmission. They're gonna blow up, they're terrible. I didn't want to do an automatic transmission because then you got to buy controllers and all that sort of stuff, and that's more expensive. And I'm trying to keep it old school to fit the truck, so we went with a manual ZF6 out of a Ford. We went with the Ford because we're using the Ford frame. Everyone does the Fumin swaps and stuff like that. So there's all the aftermarket world is your oyster out there to find the parts that you want to use to put together. There's like 30 people that make adapter plates, probably more. There's small guys that do a bunch of good work that aren't massive companies, like Mike Fukes is who did this one for me. And then there's all sorts of big other companies that sell whole kits, and they're a little bit more expensive. If you can buy them without a kit from the guys that don't mass produce warehouses and have a ton of marketing expenses, normally the part's better, and two, they're gonna be a lot more cost effective. We paid $2,000 for the transmission. We paid $400 to get the tail housing fixed, because either I cracked it with a chain or it was cracked already. Don't know, don't care. We got it fixed. I wanted to have the whole thing gone through and resealed. We put new shift bushings in there so the shifter goes nice and smooth through all the gears and everything like that. Okay, so we've covered the body, the interior, the motor, how to flip some of that stuff that you might end up with to get rid of it and get a little extra money to spend on other things. All right, so we bought a frame from 05 Ford F350. We wanted to go 05 F350 because, as you'll see in a minute, we got cool springs up front. Way better than leaf springs, gonna ride way better than these trucks ever did new. It's gonna stop better. It's got big 17-inch discs, or disc that require 17-inch wheel, and dual caliper, or dual piston brakes all the way around, full discs. So better stopping for towing heavy loads, way better than just throwing a 12 valve in this truck on a 4-wheel drive frame and saying good with it and not be able to stop it. So the frame cost us $2,000. That was the fuel tank, the lift pump we didn't use that came with the Fords, the single rear wheel, and then the front axle, which we just bolted the adapters on, not a big deal. And the fuel tank. I wanted the fuel tank because the square body tanks suck. They're small, they're metal, they rust. They're just no good. So we got the plastic tank. It holds more fuel. It holds like 30, 35 gallons, something like that. A lot better off with that tank in it than we would have been with the Chevy tank. Sold the single axle for $750 because obviously we're building a dually. We didn't need the single axle. $750 to the good there. I paid $800 for the dually axle. So that's basically, I was out $50 for the dually axle in total. So total for the frame, fuel tank, and the dually axle, $2,050. If you were trying to buy just a dually axle, they were anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500. So I got a deal on that, and I flipped that axle to cover the price. So it's a win-win. Template cab. As you know, we bought that blue cab, the baby blue cab that was on here, with no interior, nothing in it. Someone had already cut one of the rockers out, so we could basically screw it up, drop it, throw it around, not gonna hurt anything, not gonna cost myself a whole lot of money. I paid $300 for it. I drilled the holes in the floor. We set our cab mount so we didn't have to mess up our nice cab, picking it up and down 100 times with these heavy doors and interior in it. Then I sold it to a nice guy on Facebook that needed the roof. Kind of hurt me he was cutting up the roof, but whatever. Got $200 back. Total cost of a template cab, $100. You're not gonna find another square body cab for less than $500 anywhere. And then if you pay $500, you might get $300 back out. So we cleaned up on that pretty good. So back to my boy Mike. He makes the adapters. He charged me $550 for it. It came with the spacer plate, all that good stuff. Depending on which flywheel you use, you got to machine the flywheel or not. I didn't know that. I bought the one you had to machine. Of course, my luck. So I got it machined, no problem. All right. Carrot Custom does a lot of Fumin swap stuff. They do a lot of power stroke swap stuff to put 7.3s in older stuff. They have a lot of cool stuff, even if you're not working, or even if you're working on a Ford especially, because that's mainly what they specialize in. But when you swap something to make this thing, you got to use everybody. So they were super easy to work with. They had the motor mounts, $550, they bolted right up to the 12 valve, slammed right in the stock cross member that the 6.0 or 6.4 would have been in for here, like money, okay? Custom drive shaft. Obviously this thing's gonna be two-piece because this thing is long. I bought one out of a 2-wheel drive truck, took it down to Fayetteville to this place called More Motor Parts or whatever. They do really good. There's not a single computer in the place. It's all a bunch of old guys. They got an ash about a mile long on their cigarette, and they write everything down on the pad so you know they know what they're talking about. $420 for it. They shortened the front one to like 6 or 7 inches. Put new U-joints in there, threw it in the truck, perfect. The factory Superdually wheels, they're all over Marketplace. Luckily for me, in this build, I wasn't looking for 22 Forgiatos or American Forces or any of that other malarkey. I just wanted factory wheels with the slots because they look old school like these trucks would have had if they had 17s back then. Got those for 600 bucks. They had some tires on them. Obviously, the awesome people over at BFG hooked us up with these HD Terrains. So we got rid of those things as soon as we could and slapped this good rubber on here. S&B body mounts. Everyone says they're overhyped or whatever, da-da-da-da-da. I wasn't gonna pay $600 knowing someone at Ford with a discount for those crappy foam, basically glorified bathroom sponges that they call body mounts over at Ford. So I called them, got those body mounts that they sell for the Fords. I got the long bed ones that work great, even used them on my core support. My guy Scott over at Crazy Creations, he did a bunch of custom mounts and shortened the frame and everything for me. So I had him build them up. They matched the cup, seat, and everything for the S&Bs. The S&B ones matched the Ford mounts, so that was super easy, good to go. Frame modifications. Scott over at Crazy Creations did my frame mods. He Z-cut it and then fish plated it and then made an outside plate. Since obviously we got a gooseneck kitchen here, we're gonna be pulling stuff. We don't want the frame bending or breaking. That thing is probably stronger than it was from the factory, and it looks cool because it's got a bunch of awesome designs in it and stuff like that. Even though, unless you have the privilege of being underneath here, probably getting grease in your face, you're never gonna see them. But it looks cool when you're underneath there. All right, the dually adapters. I got the dually adapters from the same dude I got the rear end from. He was like a over-the-road hotshot truck guy. He got a new truck, he was getting rid of that one. It was all the 6.4, shocking, was blown up in it. So he sold me the adapters and the dually axle for a stupid deal. All right, MP271 is a manually shifted transfer case. I didn't want those stupid fly-by-wire rotating switches and all that stuff because the one we have in a different truck, you don't ever know if it's locked in. You shift a lever in the floor, you know it's locked in, and it keeps up the old school vibe of this truck because we didn't hook up the automatic hubs that don't ever work on these Fords. So we didn't hook them up, so they're just automatic. They're just automatic right here with my hand, locking, pull the lever, you know you're in 4-wheel drive, you get a good solid clunk and you're ready to go. If you're looking at 271, if you got a Ford, you need an F. If you got a Dodge, you got a D. If you got a Chevrolet, you probably need a C or a GM or something like that. All right, frame and engine paint, 150 bucks. Just kind of basic. Go down to Tractor Supply, grab some implement paint. You can look back in the other video and see that. Sprayed the motor up with some cast silver. The intercoolers and pipes. Those are kind of hard to find because everybody wants a premium for them for some reason. I don't know why. I got my intercooler from a dude. He was selling them for 300 bucks. I drug my wife and my dog to go get it. Super easy. I think he even drug my kid along too. Easy, just grabbed them in the dark, didn't even really look at them, brought them back up here. The intercooler pipes are harder to find because people want 300 bucks for the intercooler and the radiator, and then they want another 300 bucks for the pipes. If you go on eBay, we'll put the link in the description, but there's a dude, they sell Dodge parts from Canada. Good thing about Dodge parts in Canada is you can get a lot of good quality parts from a truck that's been rusted out because they put salt and have snow. So it's called Fozies truck parts. I just remember what it is, it's Fozies. You go there, you can buy them. I paid like $250 just for the intercoolers to get them here, which is way cheaper than anyone in the States was selling them. And they came with the boots. The boots were all in good shape. They still had the powder coat on, they were perfect. Fuel lines, we just bought that stuff off Amazon. We can put a link in there. We might even make an Amazon store so y'all can give me some money too. But they are Demon fuel lines or something like that, all AN. They came with a big old cluster of AN fittings. It's the cheapest AN line you can get, and you're not paying a bunch of overpriced price for Earl's or anybody else's AN lines. These have been fine so far. I'll probably break one on the way home now that I said that. Steering shaft, I took the square body shaft and I got a bent F250 shaft because obviously we have an F250 steering box. The Chevrolet part where it goes together is just this big smooth piece of metal. You can look back in the videos and see, and the Ford piece has a piece of rubber and these two big tangs. All I did was cut the hole for the tangs to slide in there so it had positive engagement and would let me turn it. We're probably gonna revisit that in a year or two and get one with heim joints on both sides, or not heim joints, but card-in joints on both sides, super nice, a little bit tighter. This steering is super awesome compared to what's in my Blazer, which is factory square body stuff. Brake lines, Advanced Auto Parts, just that nickel copper stuff you can bend by hand, and the proportioning valve from the square body, super easy. Steering hoses, I went down to the local mill, supply store, however you want to call it. It's called Cruco. They make all sorts of hydraulic hoses. They made a bunch of stuff for me in the past. They hooked me up, made those for me. Air filter is just the Napa one that everyone says is so great, and the cheapest air intake horn you can get off Amazon. We'll link it. All right, brake upgrade. The Hydro Boost, we went to the C10 Revival in Denton. On the way there, the steering got all sorts of jacked up and the brakes didn't really work that great when we got there. Come to find out, the Hydro Boost was leaking all over the place. There's a little O-ring. You can rebuild them, it's 50 bucks. Everyone says they still leak after a while or they break or whatever. So, since we already had all the other Ford stuff and I had a master cylinder sitting on the shelf from the truck, I checked it out, I thought it would fit, went and got one I knew was good from Marsh Auto Parts in Siler City. Took the firewall bracket off, slammed the joker on there, threw it in there. Perfect. This thing will probably outstop a 1500 pickup truck all day. And it weighs twice as much. 6.4 starter, Marsh Auto Parts, just a basic 6.4 starter. 6.4 starters spin a little bit faster than 6.0 starters. So if you're gonna run a 12 valve, you might as well buy the 6.4 starter because it's a little bit better. Obviously that was just off a truck at the yard. I didn't go buy a new one because why would you? It's probably crappier than the one that's in the junkyard. And then I used a bunch of recycled wire from the LS swap to do all the wiring under the hood. I might have bought a little bit of wire, and then of course I got some nice 3-to-1 heat shrink that you've seen in the wiring video. But that's everything on the truck. So the grand total, probably not including Uncle Sam's portion on some of the stuff I had to buy from an actual store, is $14,920. So if you figure a new Silverado medium trim package is probably 85 to 90 grand with the Duramax in it, we did pretty good here. Only thing I forgot to add on here is I did do vintage air, so I had 2 grand of that. So we're $17,000. So we saved roughly $60,000 building this truck over buying a new one off the shelf. You get way more looks in this thing. It brings you way more smiles. And best of all, I have the title. I don't have a $1,500 truck payment on this thing every month. And if you can say, oh, it's an old truck, it's not gonna be reliable, I don't spend $1,500 a month on this truck, even if I broke something, which I haven't yet. But overall, that's the whole wrap up. 10 out of 10 would recommend doing it. I would do it again. And in our next video, you'll see what I would change and do differently if I was gonna do it again. Nissan Altimas, man, they are like the bane of my existence.